Hey, happy Tuesday, August 27th. I can't believe it's August 27th already. This is Labor Day weekend. I hope you guys have something fun planned for the weekend, but we have to get through the week before we can get to the weekend. So I'm super excited that you are here tonight, not only because I just love seeing your comments and your names come up in my little chat feature, but I'm super excited because we have someone really fun and special joining us. And I'm just excited for you to get to know her if you don't already. And if you do know her already, then you already love her. And I'm guessing you're excited as well. So, hey, William, good to see you from LA. You're in LA today. And Brandon, hi, Brandon, repping the ATL. I love it. Good to see you. Hi, Adam. Love seeing your name every week, Adam. It's always just warms my heart. Okay, let's see. Allie and Lara and Rhonda Lynn, I just realized I have a million emails open and I should probably try to close them. Okay, sorry. I should never try to do that stuff while I'm live trying to um yeah, cross I don't see, I can't even think. Okay, forget that I tried to close my emails and at the same time and do it incognito because clearly that didn't work. Okay, so hi, Kathy from Ohio. Hi, Katie, Peggy. So good to see you guys. Carrie, great to see you too. And Meggie. So fun. Just, I love our community and our little family here. And as we're talking tonight, I'd love for you to ask your questions. This week, I'd love if your questions would be more directed towards our special guest and kind of the process that she can speak to, because, you know, you get me every week, but you don't get this next guest every week. And so I want to make the most of that time. So yeah, think about the questions that you might have for someone who isn't very talented and accomplished screenwriter. One of the first movies, probably not one of the first, but one of my favorite movies and one of the earlier movies that I did, called The Ultimate Gift. Honestly, that was just, it still is today one of my favorite experiences as far as working on that film and casting and the team that I got to work with. And that includes the incomparable and talented and wonderful Ms. Cheryl Mckay Price. And she is our guest tonight to talk all things screenwriting, character development, and then even more exciting, she has a new series coming out that I just had the honor and privilege of working with her on, and it's called These Stones. She's going to tell us all about it. It was the first time she was not only the writer, but showrunner. So she has a lot of input and insights she can share about that process, about working with the actors on the set, and how she was obviously heavily involved in the casting. So what they were looking for and what are the things that stood out to her in the process of casting and looking at actor tapes and working with the team who brought the stories to life. So please, please, please welcome my dear friend and incredibly talented Ms. Cheryl Mckay Price. Yay! She's coming, I know. Hello? There she is.
Well, that's how this works. Okay. How fun. Oh my
Hi.
gosh, it's so good to be here with you, Beverly.
I'm so excited. We go way back, and
Mhm.
I love that we go way back to a
Yes.
project that
Yeah.
I think will always be one of my
Mhm.
favorites.
Yeah.
Ultimate Gift was special for a lot of reasons.
It
So
was, and for me being my first feature film too. And the funny thing was my mom met you before I did, and I was a little jealous, and she's
yeah,
like, "I'm on your set. Where are you?" Because I was still in LA, and she's like, "You need to come home. This is fun." And so I changed my Thanksgiving ticket a week early so I could spend 2 weeks on the set, but I missed you. You and I were like
yes.
planes passing.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just talking to someone today because I happen to be casting a project that'll be shooting in Charlotte. And I was talking about that experience of
Yeah,
Charlotte at that time of year with this story was just
yeah,
like the perfect ideal, right? It was
yeah.
their houses were decorated for
Mhm.
like the holidays with
Yep.
pumpkins and candles in the windows. And I was coming from Southern California. You were too, right?
I
So
was, yes.
yeah,
So
so to
we had
go there
fake
and
snow
hear.
on set, but you missed that part because that was
Oh,
when I was
yes, I
there.
did, but so it will always be special to me for a lot of reasons, and working with you is one of those. So, I'm really, really thrilled that you're here, and, to our Let's Talk Tuesday family, like I said, please feel free to ask questions. I'm gonna be looking at the comments and things. Susan is here. Hi,
Aw.
Susan. Susan
Hey, Susan.
wasn't feeling all that great. And so she wasn't able to join us tonight, but we definitely will have Susan on as well to talk about her side of things as the director of these stones. And also, again, another voice in the casting process. And so I'm just excited to talk about that project specifically, and also in general, as far as the writing process as you're creating your characters and what you envision as far as what they are on the page to what they
Mhm.
become. I often get questions about in the audition process, like, can we change the lines a little? It's like, well, let's ask a writer that question. So, but tell us first a little quick kind of recap about your journey. How did you
Mhm.
get into screenwriting?
Yeah.
And was it screenwriting where you started, or did you think you were going to be a novelist or some sort of a different type of writer? Or how was that for you?
Well, your audience will appreciate this. I was gonna be an actress. I was gonna be
I never
famous.
knew that.
Yes, and so, like, that's what I started being interested in, and I did about 7 years of musical theater and dancing and all that, but, I
Wow.
got kicked out of a BFA acting program. My big dream was to be an actress, but my teachers were all telling me, "You belong behind the camera," and I really hope that wasn't a comment on what I look like, but,
No, you're
um,
beautiful.
but at the time, I mean, honestly, it was a God-directed rejection. I just
Mm,
didn't know it yet, and I had that
yes.
attitude like I was 19, so I'm like, "I'll show them. I'm gonna be famous one day, and they're gonna regret ever telling me to get out of acting." But truthfully, I started writing when I was 5, and I was writing stories and plays, and we would put them on. I would drag all the neighborhood people in to watch me put on these plays with my sister and whoever else, our friends in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, so writing was always a part of my life, and then after that rejection, I decided that I might need a change and, or God did really. And
Yeah.
so concurrently with that, when I was 15, I was watching these after school specials on TV that I absolutely loved. And I really
Mhm.
enjoyed this one that was directed and written by the lovely Susan Rohr. And so I wrote her a fan letter and I'm like, how do I do what you do? And so she started becoming my mentor even at a very young age. And I ended up following her to Regent University because their motto is Christian leadership to change the world. And I really wanted to just change the world. So I went
Yeah.
there to learn film and writing, and I got an internship with her and never let her go. I mean, first she was a professional mentor and then eventually personal, and she's been through a lot of things in life with me. And so this project became a very big dream come true. But all that to say,
Yes.
that was how my humble writing beginnings started. And thankfully, I got on board with God's plan and realized that's where my real talent was. And honestly, I wouldn't act. I mean, now, yes, I'm an extra in everything that I do because that's fun, but I can't. I mean, I think where it helps is that I can act out my characters in front of my computer screen, and I need that bone,
Mhm.
but I'm alone and there's no audience, and I don't have that inhibition like I did when I was on stage.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had no idea, Cheryl. In all the conversations we've had, and we've had many
Yeah.
really great conversations, I never knew that's where you started. So
Mhm.
I'm learning
Yeah.
something new about
Yeah.
you along with everybody else. But
Yeah.
that makes sense to me
Mhm.
because you do know how to write characters and to write them in a way that actors can play them.
Yeah.
And now it all makes
Yeah.
sense. I
Well,
I wanna I wanna be a fly on the wall, though, when you're acting out every role in front of your computer.
well, and one thing you might appreciate knowing, like during Ultimate Gift, I had a little bit of a block on how to do something with Jason Stevens, the lead character. And I'm like, I got to get into his head. And even though it wasn't a scene I was going to write, I decided to go to a cemetery and start talking to Red Stevens at a tombstone. And I was getting into Jason's character going like, I hated the fact as him that I could not make amends with this person because he was already gone.
Mm.
And so I walked that out. It was emotional and everything. And then I went home, and whatever scene I was on, it unlocked and I was able to write it.
Wow, that is so interesting, that connection, because that what you're talking about is definitely a process that actors use to access the same thing, to sort of unlock who a person is, or get that emotional connection to a moment in the story.
Right.
So that is so interesting. That you use that world and that history of acting in a very unique way in your work.
Yeah.
Wow. So then we got to work on Indivisible,
Mhm.
which was a war um Desert Storm? What it was which
I think
conflict
so,
was it?
yes, because
Ye
it was 2007-ish, I think.
Okay, yeah. So, Indivisible, which again, I love that film, and I I love our cast and the way that was all brought to
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
What was your I mean, these stories are so different. Ultimate Gift is a little girl with cancer and a rich kid has daddy and grandfather issues.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then you have, a couple struggling with marriage and PTSD.
Right.
What is your process as you're starting? I've
Mm.
seen you sometimes you have your Post-it note world, right?
Yes, and my binders, which are right behind me on this bookshelf, every project gets its own binder.
There you
So,
go.
um,
Okay.
but yes, just first to answer your Post-it question, I love plotting in color, and especially if I don't need to turn in a treatment, it's so much fun for me to take, like, about 10 different colors. I have a whole drawer full of them here, and, I mean, they can be purple and pink and orange and yellow and green. Like, I pick the fun colors. I don't just use the boring yellow
Yes.
type stuff. But what I love to do is pick a color for every storyline. So every main character, subplot, their workplace
Ah.
storyline, whatever the case, or which love interest. Like, let's say there's 2 to 3 love interests if it's a romantic comedy, everyone gets their own color, so that when I do my outlining, my first step into brainstorming is I just write every idea in my head. It doesn't matter what order it fits, but I do like to keep one idea or one scene per card, or whether it was a note card I used to use or now Post-it so I can put them in a binder. That way, when I later put them in order, which is like the first, second, and third act, I can look at the colors and go, oh my gosh, I haven't seen orange in a while. I'm missing the sisters
Oh.
subplot. Do I move one from later in the plotting, or do I add a scene with her so we don't lose track of her story? So it's really a visual way. It's really fun way for me to do it. And I put it in binders so they can travel with me. I've used note cards before and dropped them on a plane, and then they get all out of order.
You
So
don't want that.
yeah. So it becomes like my desk in my little binder, and I
Yes,
take them to the lake.
yes.
I love brainstorming at the lake, and we have one not far from our house, and so I bring the binder with me and play with colors. But when it comes to actually writing the scenes, I need to use either Final Draft or Movie Magic Screenwriter, because all those voices in my head of you actors that get to do the voices later, they talk too
Yes.
fast. They talk as fast as I do because I'm from Boston. Um, but it's like when I go to hear their voices and what they're saying, it's like I can't keep up if I'm not typing. So then I have to do the real writing of the scenes on the
Yeah.
computer. So, but I
So
love
the
to brainstorm
typing
away from electronics.
so the typing slows your brain long enough to
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
focus on the words you're actually writing at the moment then?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, I just have to go as fast as I can. And one of the pieces of advice, though, that Susan gave me a long time ago, that sometimes people say, like, the first draft is the vomit draft, and you just write it and do it quick. But one brilliant thing she shared with me once is there's only one time to write a first draft. And if
Mm.
you don't do it in a way that is actually at least decent writing, then you are stuck
Mhm.
in rewrite mode. You can only write a scene the
Mm.
first time once. And so I try to make sure I'm ready to write that scene. I usually
Mm.
will write in order of the outline. I'm a big plotter in advance. I'm not a seat of the pantser, as they say. Um,
Okay.
but at the same time, I really like, my favorite thing is to write the scenes, and then every day, the next day, I go back 10 pages and I clean up the 10 pages from the day before as kind of priming the pump, and then I continue where I left off.
Wow. I love hearing the process because Writing is something that in school I was like a decent creative writer, but I have found I'm a better like note giver on something that's written, because man, how do you deal with that blank page?
Yeah.
Like just the blank screen, you've been given a topic,
Hmm.
and I know sometimes you adapt books, like
Hmm.
novels and books
Yeah.
and things. That's one of the things, is kind of a specialty for you.
Yes.
Um, so how do you start?
Hmm.
Like, what's the very first thing you do?
Well, I can look at that a couple different ways. One is, you're right. I do a lot of adaptations, like Ultimate Gift, Indivisible, Extraordinary, and even these stones, having so much biblical content as well as an original manuscript, are all adaptations. But I also love the blank page. Like, it's nice when you don't have to start with one, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I love the thrill of typing fade in. But technically, the pages below it are never blank, because if I've done my
Mm,
homework and I've done my outlining, sometimes I'll actually type those notes first as like an
mm,
outline into the Movie Magic, so that
yeah.
every day I go to the table and I'm like, I'm going to write the next 5 scenes today, and I already know what they are.
Okay,
Um,
that makes
you know,
total sense.
unless some inspiration hits me. Like, the weird one was on Ultimate Gift. I couldn't outline that way because I needed to turn in a treatment, and they wanted a scene by scene. So they wanted all those details. And
Mhm.
that treatment was like 33 pages long. It took me about 3 weeks to map out the whole story, and it took me a week to write the script. The first one, the first draft. I mean,
Wow.
of course, I wrote many, but at the same
Yeah,
time, it's like, because it was so overwritten in the outline, it was so
yeah.
easy to flesh out into a script. So I
Wow.
prefer now not to outline that much, because I'd rather have more moments of inspiration and discovery in the script writing process. So later
Mhm.
in time, when clients will let me turn in 4 or 8 page treatments, I prefer that, so that I have a little more room for discovery as I'm working on the
Mm.
script.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, we have a question. We'll come
Okay.
back to this. We have a
Sure.
question. Charles Babbler says, "Hi, I just started." Oh, before that, though, sorry.
Mhm.
Monica Comercio Layton said, "Hi,
Mm.
Cheryl. This is Monica Layton from
Yes,
Act
I remember
Two.
her, of course. I know her.
Congratulations on your achievements. I'm a big fan of yours." So
Oh,
I
thank you,
wanted
Monica.
to first give you that prop. So Charles Babbler says, I am just starting writing. When you're developing your characters, how important is it for the actor to really understand the subtext, to really grab what the character is saying, or to achieve emotional response?"
Well, I think that's one place where it's also great to work with a fantastic director. And, like,
Mm,
let's say subtext is so important, and we don't want to be writing you on the nose dialogue that's super boring, and we want to give you something underneath the surface to play. And so that's where even me acting out scenes will help. But what I loved about, if to use these stones as an example, working
mhm,
with a director who also has writing sensibilities that are so close to mine, giving Susan the chance to say, okay, is there anything in here that these actors need to play depth differently? And can we
mhm,
fix this line or this moment or how this scene plays so that they have subtext to play? And that,
mhm.
I think that was the beautiful thing about partnering with somebody who really got what we were doing and was on board with this project from the beginning, and inviting her into the writer's room, even though there was just the two of
Yes,
us. And I
yes.
invited her to actually co-write the finale with me, because I created all these problems I didn't know how to solve. And I posed all these questions in the first 5 episodes, and I'm like, I don't know the answers to all these questions. And so I invited her to come help do that. And we actually split the script in half based on scenes that I thought she should write versus me. And then we merged them and rewrote each other. I mean, it was beautiful to be able to do that.
Oh, how
Um,
nice.
you
How
know,
nice to work with someone you know so well,
yeah,
and you've known for such
yeah,
a long time.
right.
There's a trust level there, it's
Yes,
not competitive, and
yes.
it's,
Hmm.
there's nothing
Yeah,
about that. It's just all about the
yeah.
good of the project. So,
Well,
yay,
and to,
Susan.
if I can answer deeper on what he just asked, the best part in working with someone like her is that she does dive deep into the character breakdowns, that she actually
Mhm,
had a meeting with every single actor by phone before we ever got on set. So everybody was well prepared. So if you're looking for that direction in the subtext, my hope is
mhm.
that you get to work with directors like her who are willing to take the
Yes.
time to do that. Because a writer isn't going to do it. Like, I would hear her talk about insights into my characters that I might have generated in the beginning. And I'm like, I didn't know that about this character. That's awesome.
Well, and there's a certain amount of it that I would think, is left for the actor to put
Mhm.
their imprint and
Yeah,
their, kind of fingerprint on.
right,
Otherwise, you're just writing for
mhm,
robots, you
right,
know? It's
yeah,
interesting because I had a coaching session earlier today, and it happened to be a young performer, a 9-year-old. And so we were
mm,
just talking about some things. And I was looking at a tape that he did. Very, very talented and cute young man. He'll go far. But we were looking at the tape, and he was biting his lip in the scene. And so I said, "Is there a reason you're biting your lip?" And he was like, "Well, because it said that in the script, you know?"
oh,
And so
okay,
what we had to do was then go, okay, well, as humans, if the writer wrote in there biting your lip, they're probably telling you just that they're nervous or have a little nervous tick, not that the actual biting of the lip is actually like the big thing,
mhm,
but it's a part of the character trait, you know? So things like that, when you
right,
write like biting on their lip,
yeah.
do you expect them to see biting their lip in every audition? Or is that simply a nod to a bigger
Mhm.
character quality?
Well, I think that example, what I like about it is that it was an action. It was a little more tangible than the writer saying, "He acts nervous." So,
Yeah.
that's actually good
Okay.
writing in comparison, so it's good that they did that, but if the actor picks up on that and they have a different way they wanna portray that, I don't see any problem with that. And
Okay.
you're right, because actors can bring a lot of interesting things to their performance on the table. In our case with these stones, we had a little bit of a mix of we cast some people we didn't know and that we worked with you, to
Mhm.
find, but then we also precast some people because we knew making an independent show, we needed to attach some people in advance to help us get the project set up.
You're
So I
right.
had the privilege of writing for Madeline Carroll's talent or Karen Abercrombie's talent or Cameron
Mhm.
Arnett and knowing them in advance. And Susan knew Rusty Joyner and Charlene Amoya very well. So we were writing to their strengths as actors. And I could already hear them saying the lines before they ever even came into the set. So
Yeah.
that really helped
Yeah.
me and my imagination go crazy as I thought of these talented people that I knew their work already.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk about These Stones. So These Stones is an episodic series,
Yeah.
and it is going to be releasing on Up Faith and Family on September 5th,
Yes.
right?
It's next Thursday.
Okay.
We start with episode 1, like, they're gonna roll it out 1 a week, 1 every week on
No
Thursdays.
binging. You
Yes.
have to wait and anticipate. It's called old school TV watching.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, what would help us is if everybody did sign up in the beginning and came back every Thursday to watch the next episode, or at least by that weekend to show that we have an ongoing viewership. So that's my request to help us because we want lots of seasons. We don't want to just do this one first season. We want to do it for 10. So we want to show
Yes.
the network that there's a demand for this and that people will keep coming back. So it runs through October 10th. And it'd be really cool if everybody could sign up and watch right along with us and talk about it and post about it on social media and tell everybody to come see.
Yeah, that will help us a lot, and at some point, Diego, if I think Diego can maybe put up
Mhm.
the website or the link to where they can go, and on the Up Faith and Family page, if you
Mhm.
comment and you
Yes.
respond to their posts about the series as well,
Yes.
then they will see that engagement and understand that people are enthusiastic about it, so which is wonderful. So, tell I know the answers to this, but I want to hear it from you. So tell
Sure.
us about the series.
Sure.
What is These Stones about? What's the world?
Sure. Well, this was a project that came to me through my executive producer, Jeanette, who her pastor had been bored during COVID and he was writing a play and then he was turning it into a book manuscript. His name's Tim and he ended up bringing in his co-writer who was our prayer team leader, Peggy. And they were
Oh,
working on this manuscript and Jeanette was like, there's something in this. You need to read it. And so I read it and I'm like, but it's not a movie. It's a series because the idea is that we have these Bible characters showing up to help people through modern day problems, but they're in our television world. They're working undercover, and they get all these side jobs, like a guidance counselor or someone who's a landscaper in a yard, and they can't tell anyone who they are until it comes the right time in the story when they're allowed to reveal who they are. And so
yeah.
the springboard came from Matthew 27, where there's this crazy verse in the Bible that's just you read it, and I have no idea what that's talking about, but it's like when Jesus died on the cross, and then he rose from the dead, the tombs broke open, and it says all these saints started raising from the dead and walking around and talking to people. And so it's like, what? And the Bible doesn't tell us how it ended. And we're not taking the position as a show that says we believe these Bible people are still here talking to people. But the pastor asked himself that what if? What if they never
Mhm.
left? And that's what we played with when we created the show. And we created the whole Stewart family, which is Madeline Carroll's character, and her
Yep.
parents, which is Charlene and Rusty, play as she's kind of that unlikely servant that gets to match these people with Karen Abercrombie's help with who's in crisis and what Bible character is best to be matched with. And then Madeline gets to play all these funny little roles along the way, helping people. But it's really cool to see like all the different issues that we were able to dive into in the first
Mhm.
season, and all the Bible characters we get to show. And they are their stories are still relevant today, but not everybody
Mhm.
might recognize that. And we're hoping through this show that they'll see those stories still matter. Like when you take
Mhm.
Rahab, we turned her into a guidance counselor, to a teenager who's a cutter, who has self-esteem issues, all because of promiscuity. Rahab was a prostitute. Who better to come talk to her about that issue? So
Right. Right.
that's our fourth episode. That is one of my favorites because we have Catherine Shepard played the role and wrote a beautiful song called Graffiti that we pretended what she wrote was about that story. She let me do that.
Mm. Yeah,
You know?
that's awesome. It's so interesting, and it feels to me a little like what my experience with watching The Chosen,
Mhm,
and I worked on it, but then I was watching it as an audience member like everybody else. And the thing that struck me in watching The Chosen was I had to realize, oh my gosh, these disciples were just people. They
mhm.
weren't
Yes.
saints. They weren't
Yes.
superhuman. They weren't
Yep.
angels. They
Yes.
were flawed human beings
Mhm,
who lived and experienced an extraordinary
mhm.
life because of Jesus and what
Right.
but Jesus didn't transform them into non-human beings. They were still
Mhm.
flawed. And so
Right.
that's what this feels a little like. Because
Yes.
yes, we have the human side, but Rahab, it's like, oh,
Mhm,
that's right. Rahab was just a
mhm.
flawed woman who dealt with a lot of really hard things, and her emotions as a woman and what it felt like to have that kind of like shame or to live with that and to move past that or to experience how God worked in their lives. So
Mhm.
it's one thing to think of the modern day humans in your scripts and in these episodes, but I loved also
Mhm.
learning more about and seeing these Bible characters in a new light,
Yeah.
and kind of experiencing them.
Yeah. Well, it's neat you say that because, like, Susan and I co-wrote a devotional that goes with the show. We're hoping people will go and dive in deeper into the themes that we write about in every episode. And one of the things we highlight in every chapter about them is what were the flaws of those Bible characters.
Mm,
And because
yes.
we love that each one of them shows up and talks to them and is like, well, this is how I messed up. And, and I like that because they are human. They should not be up on pedestals. And it's cool
Right.
to be able to play with that because if you go to someone and you're like, "Hi, I'm perfect," and you're having problems, that's not going to speak to them.
No, no, no. And I love that idea of what if they never left.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
um how did you sort of begin to wrap your brain around um this otherworldly existence of these characters and how the two worlds mesh,
Yeah.
without it getting too either new agey or
Mhm.
too sci-fi? Like, how
Right.
was that for you? How did you tackle that part of the story?
Well, that was definitely a good teamwork effort. Everyone from my executive producers with Susan and myself, just making sure we tried to make it naturally supernatural. We didn't want it to be flashy. We wanted
Mm,
to make them say things that, even though we're not writing the Bible, we wanted to make them say things that are at least believable that they may say, while putting it in, like, we have that supernatural portal. She gets swooped through this prayer closet and into the presence of these computer monitor looking things, that our VFX guy, Dave, did a wonderful job of creating, where it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen. But we
Mm,
wanted, I mean, there's all this symbolism in it that I don't have time to get into right now. We talk about it a little in the book, but I mean, even down to the count of the stars that lead her through the hallway, I come from a Bible verse. So we tried to put
mm,
those pieces of authenticity that you have to dig a little deeper to find out what we were doing. Um, but our hope is that we're not doing, like, we're not pretending that this is something we believe is happening, but it's something that we believe can help people understand that God's word is
mm.
still relevant. We're not the ones making it still relevant. It already
Yeah.
is. But there are people that may, like, reject the word thinking, oh, that's for
Mhm.
that time period. And by
Right.
bringing them now, it's like, well, if they're here and they confess their mistakes, I think it helps people understand that, oh, it's not that far out there, or it does apply to my life.
Right. Yes, yes. Yeah, exactly. That self-esteem and, family issues, those kinds of struggles are
Yeah,
what drove these human beings during biblical times and
right.
are the same at the core, the same things that are, driving us and moving us. So yeah, that's incredible. So, um okay, so let's talk about a few of the actors. So Madeline, of
Yeah.
course, um, it- most of you guys, or you probably know her from I Can Only Imagine. She played Bart's girlfriend and then eventual wife, but she was also great movies. Younger, she did one of my favorites is Swing Vote. She
Yes.
also did
So good.
Flipped.
I love Flipped. Oh
I
my
do
gosh.
too. I told actually the mom of that young performer I was coaching, I said, like, "Go watch a movie like Flipped and
Mhm.
see,
Yeah.
how these really good young performers, um, are able to access emotional depth because,
Mhm. Yeah.
as actors, that's
Yeah.
what we're looking for."
Exactly.
So Madeline,
Mhm.
how what was it about Madeline and what she could bring to the character that
Yeah.
connected with you for that role?
Well, first of all, I have you to thank that I knew her in the first place, because you helped, I guess, her get the role in Indivisible, and I never would have
Mhm,
met her had it not been for that. I knew who she was because of
mhm,
Flipped, because that won an award the same year as The Ultimate Gift, and that's how I found out about it. But when it came to her, my husband and I met her. It was this night at the church where we were filming the carnival scene that got interrupted by this massive storm that knocked out power
mm.
everywhere in Memphis. And she was doing a BTS video. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and none of us were allowed to leave. We were in the hurricane shelter or whatever they
Oh,
had there.
right.
But she was busy doing this video. And I told Chris, I'm like, because I actually was her stand-in that night, never had a chance to meet her yet. I was doing, like, pushing the stroller through the carnival while she was off getting dressed. And so we kept missing each other. She didn't know that, but I did. And
Yeah.
so finally, about 1:30 in the morning, my husband and I were kind of waiting for her to finish her interview. And we went up to her, and I was telling her, I'm like, to show my husband who you are, we just watched Flipped a couple days ago. And she was like, oh my gosh, I love that. That's so awesome. And so we just started talking about the Lord, and everything
Mm,
about her was so infectious for Jesus
mhm,
that we both left that going. She is our favorite person. Like, and I'm like, I
mhm.
have got to work with her again.
Yeah.
And so that was, I don't know, was that 2017 maybe? It was, she
Yeah,
had filmed I Can Only Imagine, but it wasn't out yet. And then,
right.
so when this came up and I had the opportunity, when Jeanette, and I formed this company, I was like, I want to write something that Madeline can do. And so when I knew I wanted to create a family to follow in these stones, because I
Yep,
knew you can't just do guest stars. You have to have somebody to follow the whole way through that gets an arc.
absolutely.
I'm like,
Right.
I want to hinge this on Madeline. And so I started sending them clips and saying, watch her. And I started creating McKenna with her in mind on purpose as
Yeah.
the lead. And so, what was so awesome, a nice payoff with her, was that once I gave her the scripts and she read them, she remembered when she was doing, promotion for I Can Only Imagine, she was
Mm.
backstage at the 700 Club after an interview, and somebody started praying for her. And they said that she was 22. They said, when you're 26, someone is going to come to you and say they wrote a role for you, and this project is going to be a blessing to you. And that turned into these stones.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's
Yeah.
really wonderful. Well, and an interesting other kind of full circle moment is I met Madeline because she auditioned for Ultimate Gift.
Yeah.
And so it was Abigail Breslin had auditioned and Madeline had auditioned. And at the time, Abigail had kind of a slightly higher profile because of Little Miss Sunshine was going to be coming out and there was getting all sorts of awards and
Yeah.
press and buzz and all of that. And it it was a really tough decision because Madeline was so
Mhm.
good,
I can see that.
so good.
Yeah.
And of course, Abigail's wonderful as well. So our
Yeah.
decision was so difficult. And when the final decision was made to go with Abigail, I, in that moment, said, I will work with Madeline Carroll.
Yeah.
And I never forgot her. So hopefully that's an
Mhm.
encouragement to the
Yeah.
rest of you actors that when we're going through this process, not just myself, but writers and producers who are a part of the casting process, there are those people we come across that it may not work out for that project, but
Mhm.
in our mind, we're like, I will work with that person one
Right.
way or another. And in this case, Cheryl was able to actually write a role for that
Yeah.
person. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah,
it's
and I knew
really
she could do it
wonderful.
because that girl can do emotion like nobody else, and then
Yep.
we put her through the ringer. Like, we shot
Yes.
all the farm scenes the first 2 weeks, and that's all the cemetery visits, a lot of crying, a lot of fighting with her father, but she what a pro. And then the
Yeah.
next thing you know,
Yeah.
she's off goofing off, like, she can just shut it off, like
That's the thing. She is a total goofball and she will laugh and be silly. And then one minute she's like an absolute like fashion diva, high
Mhm,
fashion, walk the runway kind of a,
mhm,
a girl. And then she's no makeup being silly. And then she's a preacher, man. You get her talking
mhm,
about God and talking
yeah,
about the Lord, and she will not she knows her stuff. She is passionate about the Lord. And I remember during the PR for I can only imagine there were some times, someone would ask a question about her and her relation, and she would just go like, preach.
yeah.
Okay, good. Here we go. We got a little mini sermon. So
She
um
did that on set. Our film office girl came with her daughter who wants to be an actress, and in the middle, it was
mm.
our last night of filming, and all of a sudden, she just spoke into that girl's life for a solid 5 minutes, and then they said, "All right,
Wow.
Madeline, we need you," and she hugged her and walked on set and did a scene, and that girl has never
Wow.
forgotten that moment, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I totally love that. Like being obviously there's things we need to accomplish, but being present enough that if you feel like God's saying,
Mhm.
take this minute and talk to this girl,
Yeah,
that she
yeah,
does it.
yep.
Okay, so we'll keep talking about these stones. There's a couple
Okay.
of questions have come in. Allie Gibbs says, hi, Cheryl, I love your work and have watched The Ultimate Gift many times, one
Oh,
of their
yay.
family favorites.
Thank you.
What are the steps following the completion of a screenplay? So you typed fade out, then what
Yes.
happens?
Well, like in the case of something like Ultimate Gift, your job is over. And so, especially because almost all of those, like that Invisible Extraordinary, were works for hire. So they came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to write this project." So I get to do them. And then it's like giving up a child for adoption. And then you get to watch someone else raise it. And you get to visit the set and be quiet and eat craft services. So that's been my
How hard
process.
is how hard is that for you when you go and visit set
Yeah.
and, some things have maybe been changed, maybe
Mhm.
there's been a draft since yours.
Yeah.
How
Right.
how is that for you? How do you handle that?
It's been all over the map. I mean, sometimes it's hard, sometimes you're like, "Wow, they make me look good." You know? It can be very different, and so or
Yeah.
sometimes an actor can bring something beautiful to the table. You just never know. You expect it to be collaborative, you expect certain things to be different. Like, I remember one time on Indivisible, it was funny. My husband and I were in the garage watching a scene, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, "This is my dialogue, but I don't remember this taking place in the kitchen." And I'm like, "Oh, I remember. This was supposed to be a date by the water in Memphis." And I'm like, "Oh, that was probably too much trouble to go rent the
Yes.
lake or the water, the waterway that they have down there. I'm sure that was too much trouble." So they just moved the scene, so that was fine,
Too
obviously, as
too
long as the
much
heart.
trouble slash too much money.
Exactly. So, but it still worked. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for the most part, it is you have to know your place, and there's a big difference between when you are a writer for hire and then when you are also a producer. And These Stones
Mm,
was my first chance to do that, where I got to, I don't even like using the word producer. I like to call it a steward, where I got to steward a project from start to
mm,
finish. And
yeah.
I sometimes joke, if you don't like the show, you can blame me. Sometimes you see something and you're like, I don't recognize that at all. And it's like, so if you don't
Yeah.
like it, you can't blame me because it has nothing to do with me anymore. And that
Totally.
has happened too.
Totally.
But that's how this industry works.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's I think if someone had a passion project, that's a good one to save for when you get to a point in your career that you are able to help produce at least, and then
Yes.
still expect to be collaborative because everybody comes to the table with wonderful ideas. And then you just have
Yeah.
to navigate what ideas to keep and then what ideas to fight for. And so you give
Yes.
a lot and then take one thing where you're like, I want to fight for this, but you can have the other nine. You know,
Yeah. So tell me about, let's talk again specifically these stones. So
sure.
you have, we were really fortunate. You were really fortunate to attract a wonderful cast of characters. And that has nothing to do with me. That's everything about the
Yeah.
script, resonating with people. So we have Madeline Carroll, Karen Abercrombie, Cameron Arnett,
hmm
um, uh,
Charlene, Moya, and Rusty
Charlene,
Joyner.
yes, Amoya,
Wonderful.
exactly.
And Aaron Bethea,
Dexter
one of our,
Maslin, Aaron, but yeah, you guys, it's a
and Michael
who's
and
who,
Hansen. you know,
a who's who of people that you love, and then also some new people that
mhm.
you haven't yet gotten to know.
Yes.
Um, so how did you navigate, because especially people like Karen and Cameron and Cheryl and people who have a wealth of experience that they're bringing to the project and to the role, when they give notes, like as the actor, oftentimes it's like, oh, I have you hear it almost every project. I have
Yeah.
a few thoughts on the script, and the
Yeah.
actors will say, how do you navigate that balancing making the actor happy versus making
Mhm.
sure you're true to what you intended as the
Right.
screenwriter?
I have to say, this was probably a very unusual production that hardly ever happened. We didn't get
Interesting.
a lot of changes from the actors. I mean, there might have been something like this might be a little more conversational, which is perfectly fine. I mean, because
Right,
I might read something out loud, but I know the words in advance when I'm acting it out because I'd like to do that to
right.
proofread. But I can't say that we had that much. Like we had locked scripts quite a bit before we went to set, and we did not have any rewriting on set. If it was
Wow.
just because somebody couldn't get 2 words in a row that started with the same letter, like, there was really no
Right.
changes in that regard. But I know that that's not typical and
Yeah,
probably will never happen
really.
again. I mean, but for whatever
Enjoy it.
reason, we did not get nobody came back to me and said, "Hey, I don't like my character. Can we fix this?" But it may have something to do with we knew in advance sometimes who we were writing for, and so
Mhm.
we were already writing for something that we knew would be fun for them to play. Like Karen Abercrombie and all the snarkiness we gave Miriam was a
Yeah.
ton of fun to play with. And then because Susan knew Charlene so well, there were some wonderful things she added for Charlene that were great
Mm,
because like really wanted all the flashbacks that we have with her and where Madeline's got the purple hair. And of course, it's purple because of me, because that's just my thing.
yes.
But I'm totally stealing that hairpiece someday. We have it in storage.
Oh, I
I
love
want to
it.
start wearing it. But Susan was the one who thought about having the videotape she leaves behind so that she would have more screen time. First of all, because Charlene is amazing, but
Yeah.
also it's a beautiful gesture that I've thought through. How sometimes you are not ready to hear advice that someone has for you.
Mm,
And
yep.
that's where Eliana is coming from in those videos that we wrote for her to do that she leaves behind for her daughter. Because she knows she's going to find them one day. She doesn't know when, and how pivotal they are now to the series. It reminds me of when I don't want to read the Bible because it's going to tell me something I don't want to hear.
Yes,
So,
exactly,
so it's a really cool
exactly.
device. But yeah, I mean, we didn't have that problem. I didn't have complaints from actors saying this is just so unnatural and I can't play this as is. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
It's interesting because, working on something just the other day, there's a role that is a good role, has a lot of meat on it, but it isn't like the main, it's not really the main guest star in the episode,
mhm,
but there was an actor that we were talking to about potentially playing it, And it did come down to, well, could we give this character more of an arc? Could we expand it a little bit to give this act, because this actor is a very experienced and
Yeah.
known actor, and I understood why he was asking that. And so I had to go to the writer, and who's also the producer,
hmm
and say, do you
Can you
do you
can
want
you
to
add
do
dark?
that? And ultimately it came down to no, because it would pull focus from who the real sort of story is about. And so the choice was made to hold that actor for something different down the road in a different episode, rather than go in and modify this
Right.
character and give it more than it
hmm
really warrants to serve the story.
Right.
So that's always kind of a challenge. Okay, couple of other questions. Peggy Schott said, I saw 2 episodes at ICFF in Orlando. Really looking forward to more.
Mm.
And Peggy
Loved
Schott
meeting Peggy.
also, and
She's
she
so
also,
awesome.
she posted the website. It's upfaithandfamily.com.
hmm
So you guys can go to that. And Ginny, um, is asking, is it similar to Touched by an Angel? And that reference does
Yes.
come to mind to
Yes.
me as well. Of
Yes.
course, part of that is my age,
Yeah.
because that was a big
Yes.
show. But
And we use that reference as well. But we used what we like to say, what is very similar is, how Monica might work with someone and then all of a sudden she's finally allowed to tell them, I'm an angel,
right,
and she has the light.
yes,
Um,
yes,
yes, we have a
yes,
reveal moment where we show the person is like in their outfit that is the modern day outfit, and then we show the quick reveal where they get to see what they look like in Bible time. So that part is definitely very similar. We just feel
yes,
like we've modernized it a little bit, and we have a family at the heart of it, in addition to the helpers.
yes. Okay, yeah. So they're the throughway. They're kind of the
Yeah,
core of the story, just like
right.
yeah, it's a little bit Highway to Heaven, right? That Michael
Yeah,
Landon character
yeah.
was, and his buddy were the throughway, and then they
hmm
met all these
Right.
different people.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jan Bush says people have never changed. They've always been the same no matter when they lived. It's so true. That really speaks to the relevance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Denise Neely Mckay,
Oh, that would be my mom.
there you go. Um, And she says, I'm so proud of you, Cheryl. She said she enjoyed meeting me, but she's
Of
so
course.
proud of you. So
Yeah.
your mom is proud of you. Give you
Yes.
some
She's my
encouragement.
biggest cheerleader.
That's
And
good.
she's
That's
in the
nice.
show. She's in episode 6, her and my father.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yep.
we'll have to look for that. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, they have a really good shot.
Let's see. Carrie Fabian. Awesome, Carrie. Carrie, who, man, jack of all trades. Talk about working any department you need her in. She was even, I think, the casting point on Disciples in the Moonlight. So she's even
Oh,
coming for my
love
job,
that movie. I've
which
seen
is
it
okay,
twice.
Carrie. That's awesome. You go for it. She says, what is it like being a showrunner for these stones, and how much, if any, did Up Faith and Family have a say in the show's writing and content?
Well, we made this independently on the front end, and that was a very deliberate choice. It was independently financed with the idea that we would sell and license it after, but keep total ownership. So Up came to the table after it was already done. We were through post production by the time we approached them. I have some good friends that have a lot of stuff on their network who loved the show and recommended it to them, and that's how that door opened. And so we did not have any network giving us notes on the front end because they didn't know about us yet. But that was definitely a choice. And that was part of the heart of why we formed Stone Impact Media, was to make our own productions and to
Mm,
be able to steward the stories on the front end the way that we
mhm,
wanted to tell stories. Some of this was inspired by my own frustration of trying to make Never the Bride my passion project, that has God as a character, and being told
mhm,
over and over and over again notes that were going to ruin God. And the easiest example I can give you is twice a network said they loved the project, but would I diminish God's role? And I said no. And I have
no.
turned down no less than 15 contracts on that project because every time I sensed that they were going to mess with God. And so
Yeah.
that was the complaint I was making to my buddy Jeanette, and like, hey, I'm so tired of this. And she's like, well, what do you need? And we started talking about this. And lo and behold, next thing you know, Stone Impact Media was born. We were going to make Never the Bride, but it was like 2021 when we started
Mhm.
this process, and no one was
Yep.
going to theaters, and it's a feature length, and it could be for television, whatever. But at the time we were like
Right.
series streaming. So that's why we ended up there. But yeah, so far I haven't had to deal with the network note side. Now I don't know what would happen with season two. It would depend on how it's funded and who is
Mhm.
involved on the front end of it, if we would then have to start incorporating that as part of our process.
But at least you've established what the show is. You've
Yeah.
established that
Yes.
the bones of the show, they can't
Yeah.
really, like, water down God for a season 2
Nope.
or,
Or
take
say,
let's
could you
not
get
have
the
any
Bible
Bible
characters?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, okay, that would be a different show.
Yes. Well, and we can have spin-offs. Like so there's one meeting we were in, someone said, well, what if someone says, let's make it that the leader is a guy next time instead of McKenna? And I'm like, well, that's the spin-off. But we're
Yes,
still keeping McKenna,
exactly.
you
It's
know, at
exactly
least for a little while. I have
little
for at least a few
handoff.
seasons with this great Stewart family that I now just adore.
I
I'm not ready
love
to
it.
let them go.
Yes. Yeah, and there's so much to explore there. So, you did something that it was very brave, in my opinion, but also very vulnerable for you, which is you brought a piece of your own journey, um, a, a, a very personal piece of your own journey to one of the episodes.
Yeah.
How was that for you? First of all, why did you decide to do that now, right?
Mhm.
Why did you
Yeah.
decide to do that for this project?
Okay.
And how was that for you writing fiction, but it was based in real life for
Hmm.
you that you lived and walked?
Right.
How was that process for you?
Well, I would say it was very healing.
Mm.
In 2021, when we first came up with this company, um, you were there at Christian Worldview Film Festival, and that was a life-changing week for me, that I have mentioned before, like that started with Rebecca Cook, continued with you, and ended with Sherry Rigby. And I
Yes.
cried all week, and
Yeah.
I was crying about this very story all week. But by the end of the week, I remember telling Stephanie Parker, I was like, we want to maybe consider doing this show, like based on this manuscript, and at the end of that week, I'm like, not only are we going to not make Never the Bride right now, we're going to switch to this show. And then God was like, oh, and then by the way, you're going to tell your story, and only for one
Wow.
episode. It's just in one of the six, so it's not all about us, certainly, but it was that was a very life-changing week for me, where I had been angry at God, and I
Mm.
was getting in God's way and all of these things, and it was like, all right, it's time for you to heal. It's time for you to let go of your anger with me. And what that is about is my husband and I's journey with infertility. And I knew I wanted to work it into an episode. I wanted to finally be able to tell the story where what happens if God says no. I'm
Mm.
tired of seeing stories that only people get what they want eventually in the end, or that God always shows up with the miracle the way that you ask for it. And so I get to dive into that in some very personal ways. And this is our first
Mm.
public admission of that with this PR circuit of the release of the
Yes.
show. That, I mean, I kept it off social media. I never talked about it. It was embarrassing. And then like, and you want me to do what? And so thankfully Jeanette supported it, and we were able to put it in the show. And Erin Bethea plays me.
Yes.
That was fun to see someone that is a very good actress playing me. And the very first scene we shot of the show is literally directly lifted from my life of being in a waiting room with a sonogram of a tumor that was growing while everyone around me was walking with their baby sonograms. And so I put that, I was like, that's where the show's going to start for Erin, playing me. And I got to be
Wow.
a nurse in the scene. And the nice thing about that showed me how healed I was is that was day one of shoot, first scene we shot, and I was
Wow.
having a blast. And then and Erin asked me, she's like, "Is this kind of surreal for you that not only are you doing your own show, it's your show, like it's your story?"
It's
And I'm like,
yours.
"Yeah, I know. Isn't this cool? I'm in my purple scrubs, having a blast." And it wasn't emotional like I thought it might be, but it wasn't. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
am really healed, and thank you, Lord. And a lot of people, like when
Yes.
Madeline and Charlene read all six scripts as a whole, both of them called me and said, "That's my favorite episode. That's the one that's going
Wow.
to help people." And I was like, "Well, really cool. And then I've seen it even in the screenings. That's the one Peggy mentioned.
Yeah.
She was at ICFF. That was the episode they wanted to screen, and it kind of blew my mind. But it was really neat to see that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what God does with it.
Yeah, that's what's awesome is that you're not driving this. You're not saying, "Oh, let's submit episode 4," or
Yeah,
"Let's highlight episode 4."
yeah,
You
or
simply
three.
said, yeah, or oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Or
yeah,
sorry, yeah,
yeah.
3. Sorry, I
I
can't
gave
keep
them
all
4
the
episodes. They chose number 3. That was the
yes,
interesting thing.
exactly.
Like, we
Episode
submitted 4 of
3
them. Yeah,
with Aaron and,
yeah,
the fact that God is driving that, not you. You're
mhm,
being obedient to the prompting that he gave you and the peace that he gave you,
yeah,
and he is doing the work.
yeah,
He is now moving it forward, not you, and it's I remember that week and those conversations
mhm.
and just, it
The
was a
Cry
profound
Fest.
I was gonna say it was a profound week for me too, and
Yeah,
our conversation was, really memorable and meaningful for me as well, and it's such a testament to how God isn't gonna just push us out there and out on stage with no clothes on and completely vulnerable and,
yeah.
like, "Okay, well, go deal with it." No,
Mhm,
he was preparing your
mhm,
heart bit by bit by bit to the point where you were finally able to feel his peace and his safety, like,
mhm.
that you would be okay, that he's
Yeah,
got you, and that he's gonna use your story and that experience for
mhm,
good, for
yeah.
his
Romans
glory.
8:28. That's
Yes.
totally at work. It's like you take the bad and you use it for the good. That only he can do
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah, exactly, and I'm so proud of you for being willing and faithful to that because you could have still said no, and, like, in your humanness, like, "No, I'm
Yeah,
not ready, that's too
yeah,
vulnerable."
yeah.
So, it really I'm really proud of you, and it really inspires me so much to see how your faithfulness, God is using that, and it's going to bring great, peace and healing and conversations and growth as a result of your willingness to go into that subject matter. And I'd say that for all the episodes. It just so happens that that one is, I think,
Mhm,
that topic of dealing with infertility as a woman. Because you and I talked about the
mhm,
fact that I couldn't have kids either, so there was some commonality in there, and
mhm.
just it it's such a complex topic, but that at the end of the day, God is still God, right? And God is still good. And to see that coming around is
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
And he did give me a wonderful husband, Chris, to go through it with. I was not alone, and
yes,
that's the tagline of our show, being "You are never alone," and that was God's beautiful gift to me, was Chris.
yes, absolutely. And which is so interesting because Never the Bride was a different part of your a
Yes, it
different part
is.
of your
I
journey.
came out with that as a novel before Chris and I were dating in my
I love
irritation
it.
that God was taking forever to write my love story.
That movie will get made. It will
Mhm.
get made. It's
Yeah, we
just
joke it won't
it'll
be never the movie. That's our catchphrase.
I
It'll be
love it.
finally the
I
movie,
love it.
you know?
Okay, let's see. What about Cheryl Ricker says, what a
Oh, I know
powerful
her. Hi.
testimony. So courageous. I love hearing about your healing. I believe others will find inner healing too.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Brooklyn Whitmer says, love
Yes.
your vulnerability. Thanks for sharing your heart behind this project. The Lord has given
Thanks.
you strength, love, joy, peace. Keep shining, dear friend.
Aw, thank you, Brooklyn.
It's so true. Oh gosh, Catherine Lacey Dodd. So Catherine Dodd, her son Ruben was in our movie I Still Believe, and he played
Oh,
the
yeah.
younger brother to Jeremy Camp's
Mhm.
character, and it was the younger brother. Originally, Jeremy's actual younger brother has Down syndrome, but we found this wonderful actor named Ruben Dodd, and
Mhm.
Catherine
Nice.
Dodd said, "That is my journey. IVF after 6 years. Ruben is such an incredible miracle."
Aw,
And you
okay.
just think about, Ruben and God's. like you said, it doesn't look, sometimes the answers don't look the way we thought they would look.
Right.
And but he's still faithful,
Mhm.
it just looks a little different, feels a little different, but it's still equally as wonderful. So
Mhm.
um let's see, let me make sure I didn't miss any other questions. So okay, so what can we do? Remind us again what we can
Yes.
do between now and
Yes.
September 5th to help support these stones.
Okay, well, follow us on Facebook under These Stones, the series. And then if you go to stoneimpactmedia.com, you can find all the links to our socials, but that's the
Great.
one it's easiest to say off the top of my head, and we're all on Facebook. But and then we have a coupon code that they can use for the Up Faith and Family link that you mentioned.
Right, because it's a subscription
It
based
is.
streaming service, right? So the
Yeah.
coupon code will save
It's
you some money on the streaming.
Yes, it's Stones 30, which is all capital letters, the word Stones, and that's to get 30% off the first month. And our request is everybody join for at least 2 months. It'll cost you about $10 so you can come back every week. That would be very helpful. And then also consider getting the book that goes with it. This is that study guide I mentioned. And I do, in the chapter about episode 3, I go a lot deeper into our true life
Mm,
story in that
right,
because there's just not time for that, obviously, in this setting. But
right.
um, but supporting that and maybe getting groups together and watching. Like, one of the things I love about the book is we have what we call activations, and there's so many
Mm,
things you can do that are inspired by this series to help your community and people, and listening to what, like, and looking for what might be somebody out there hurting, or how you
yeah.
could encourage someone. And one of my favorites is get together, have a rock party, paint words on them, ask God, what word should I put on this? Because you know who's going to find it. Have those
Mm,
kinds of activities going, and hoping that
yes.
other people will be encouraged by just the things that this can springboard from.
Yes, because for those of you who haven't seen anything about the series, it's very community oriented.
Yeah.
It's Madeline Carroll's character being prompted to go out into the community and find God's kind of leading her to people who need something at that time.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so it is very community oriented, which I
Yes.
love.
Hmm.
Susan Rohr, you are such a love. So she has the promo
Yeah.
code and the links and all the
Right.
information. And
Yeah.
Susan, I'm super excited to talk to you about the directing side of this and working with the actors and all of that. And so we're going to do that in a couple of weeks as well. Next week,
Hmm.
tell us who we get the joy of sharing with next week on our Let's Talk
Yes.
Tuesday.
I am so excited. I can't wait to sit in and listen. We have booked Madeline Carroll and Rusty
Awesome.
Joyner and Charlene Amoya and Karen Abercrombie to come join you. I know you had a limit of those 4 boxes. It's going
Yeah.
to be kind of crowded,
Yeah.
but we wanted to bring the Stewart family and
Yes.
Karen in. And I mean, I wish we could bring everybody, believe me.
Yep.
But they're all going to be here to talk to you and answer questions. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to come.
Yes. And so our Let's Talk Tuesday family, keep already be thinking about questions you want to ask them, not only questions about this specific experience of these characters, which we'll talk a lot about, but just in general, these are actors who are working a lot, and we have kind of a wide age range and types and things. So be thinking about those questions that might be helpful to you from our guests next week. But yeah, we're going to dive into the characters of these stones and who each of these people play and how they all fit together. And I'm just excited for you guys to see the series. And really, honestly, that $10, consider it a love gift, blessing gift.
Yes.
Um, Towards hopefully seeing content like this continue to be made and
Mhm.
supported. And it would mean a lot if you guys
Mhm.
could just go on there, be active on the Facebook pages, sign up for at least 2 months.
Mhm.
And,
Yes.
who knows, maybe you'll see a bunch of other content you really love and you'll just keep going on with it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, love you, Cheryl. I'm so proud of you. And so, my gosh, I'm telling you guys, as a showrunner, this woman was on it. You were amazing. you exhausted me just knowing
I was
the
exhausted.
the millions of details you had in your head. I know you were working with Drew Waters and Aaron Bethea. They're married and they have their company called Argentum Entertainment. And so they were kind of your boots on the ground producing partners as far as the day-to-day stuff. But man,
Yeah.
the amount of stuff you managed to keep straight and do it with a kind attitude and an encouragement and a joy. I just thank you for that. And I just want to give you kudos because your spirit and the way that you led the series is absolutely in keeping with the series itself. And just super proud of you,
Thank
and
you.
can't
I
wait for
appreciate
everyone to
that.
see it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you
I look
so
forward
much.
to us working together again. I'm sure we will. Um, I don't know when, I don't know where, but it will happen. Maybe it'll be
Yes.
season 2, right? That's what we hope. But you guys go and check out Cheryl's other projects if you haven't seen Indivisible or Extraordinary. They're also really wonderful scripts and stories. And if you're thinking about it, all you praying people, why don't you jot down Never the Bride and pray for God's wisdom and direction in getting that story somewhere where it can be made the way that it needs to be made, and just ask for God's wisdom and guidance on that. It's something that, Cheryl, you've been shepherding for how long, that story?
About 2006 was when I came up with the idea of that one. And I remember
Okay.
pitching it to Susan and I said, "Is this a good idea for a movie?"
Yeah, and
It's
it's
like,
won
"You
how
don't write
many
it, I will."
the screenplay has won how many awards? Like, it just keeps winning
Yeah.
awards.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
thankfully, I just recently started resubmitting it and it's been winning, which has helped because I think it's bringing traction at a time we need it. And with
Yes.
the on the heels of these stones, I think it might help us with that. So
Well, Tina Rich says, "Never the Bride, praying now."
thank you.
So, yeah, be praying for that project specifically because, again, I there's just so much that I think people could relate to and understand. Plus, laugh, right? We need some
Yeah.
laughter and some
Yeah.
levity in our lives as well. So,
Yes.
anyway,
Thank you. Appreciate
Cheryl,
that.
love you.
You too.
Thank you for being a part of tonight, and we'll look forward to knowing you're listening in next week when we're talking with your
Of course.
beautiful cast.
Thank you.
Okay, love you. All right, you guys, wasn't that awesome? Love Cheryl. She's so talented and so good. So next week we have the actors from these stones, 4 of the actors from these stones, and again, it's Rusty Joyner, Madeline Carroll, Karen Abercrombie, and Cheryl Moya, and it's going to be. Did I just say Cheryl? No, it's Cheryl Mckay and Charlene Amoy. My brain's going too fast. So anyway, join us next week. Share this, send it to your friends. Again, anybody who's a budding screenwriter and wants to hear more about the process, I think the information Cheryl was able to give us just about her process and setting up the stories and starting the actual writing process, super informative. So share it to anybody you think might benefit from it. And have a wonderful week, a great Labor Day, and then we will see you next Tuesday. Love you guys so much. Bye. Mwah.
Okay, let's go.